Hello, so this will be a presentation on running PrairieLearn in the virtual machine. So here's a high-level overview. We are currently on step 4, and the video overview will be cloning the PrairieLearn Git repository, installing Docker on the remote virtual machine. We're going to be editing the PrairieLearn config files in the Docker compose file, and we're going to be creating the PrairieLearn JSON. And to run this, we're going to be using Docker compose -f and then the Docker compose production, and then just the command up. So here are sources. You can look through these to have more info on what we're doing here and why. But just to keep it short, why Docker compose? Simply handles container coupling through a config file and also dependency for running PrairieLearn in production. Why do we need to get the Git repo? This is because we need to edit the project files for Docker to build a production image of PrairieLearn. So here's the diagram overview again. So we're going to be focusing on the actual virtual machine with the PrairieLearn Docker container, and yeah, we're just going to be using inside of this Docker container pretty much is the PrairieLearn image or the Git repository. And here for Docker, it needs to be installed. This is it depends on PrairieLearn depends on Docker to be running, and the Docker compose PrairieLearn supported infrastructure to run server in production. So the PrairieLearn Git repo, this is so what we need to do is just to edit the config files to run PrairieLearn in production. So this walkthrough will contain the process of cloning the PrairieLearn image, installing Docker, and running it in the remote virtual machine, and I'll play that right now.
This is a quick overview of the docs we use to run PrairieLearn. These are PrairieLearn's official docs. So the first thing you are going to want to do is download or git clone from here. Then you'll want to go down to using Docker compose, because this is much easier to run it and for the remote. So first you have to follow the steps to install PrairieLearn with the local source code. As we showed earlier, you don't have to follow all of them, just the very first one, which is cloning the repository. Then you'll run this in the root folder, which for us was just PrairieLearn, or the folder this is in. Then the config is not mandatory. It just allows you to edit a couple of and that is all. Okay, if you don't know how to get to where we are right now, please see the previous video on how to connect to the VM remotely in VS Code. So the first thing we're going to do is, if you can't see that terminal, you're going to want to toggle it with Control tilde. Then you're going to want to cd into home VM user, which is our user that we want to run this. Then we are going to want to pull out and git clone the repository. If you do not have Git installed, I would recommend doing so. So here, if we refresh this, we will see that there is a PrairieLearn. We're going to want to cd into PrairieLearn, capital P. We're going to ls, and we should see Docker compose down here. Quickly double check that we don't have too much to edit here, because you should be able to run it by just typing Docker compose, a couple of keywords that are in the doc. Looks like we will be installing Docker. And I will be getting the password. Okay, so we will then be running sudo. And while this downloads, we want to Just wait. And there we go. We have the server running remotely. That is it.
So recap of the walkthrough, PrairieLearn can now be ran in production mode, and the PrairieLearn configs can now be added and edited. The next will be creating the config file. In this config file, we're going to be creating the config.json and editing the Docker Compose production.yml to actually read this config file. Thank you.